when you're down that you gotta get up. Don't let them walk all over your face. Stand up for yourself and make everything right again. Even if some guy's trying to blackmail you and your girlfriend thinks you suck, it's up to you to let them know that it was all just part of some rich guy's evil plan. Look out ahead, there's a truck changing lanes. You got some yellow crumbs on your upper lip, and those warts on your dick aren't gonna go away unless you start using topical cream every day.
Hello, and welcome to Staff Picks, the podcast for movie nerds by movie nerds. As always, I'm Mario Lanza, and we have a fun episode for you guys today. I'm just going to jump right into this one because this is one of those comedies that really makes me laugh. It's one of these things that's kind of a beloved comedy now. It would be hard to call this one underloved because so many people like it now, but it was not that way at the time. And we're talking about BASEketball, of course, the 1998 comedy starring Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And this is going to be a fun one because this is a movie that really legitimately makes me laugh. It made me laugh when I first saw it. It makes me laugh now. It's just one of these legitimately funny movies. And I'm going to bring a legitimately funny person on to help me talk about this. And this is someone I've been dying to do a podcast with for a long time. You may know her from her many appearances on Rob Has a Podcast. She's one of the superstars over there. And joining me today on the Malaka Laka Board of Trust, I would like to welcome Liana Boraas.
Hi, I am so excited to be here to talk about something other than reality television and to talk about a movie, like you said, is just, in my mind, so funny. There's so many quotable lines, and this movie means a lot to me, and I can't wait to break all of this nonsense down.
Okay, I'm glad you said it means a lot to you because one of the interesting things about this movie is that we are approaching it kind of from different angles here, is that you're significantly younger than me, so I know you didn't see this in the theater, correct?
I did not see this in the theater. So my sister is 9.5 years older than I am. And I remember she went off to college in 1999. So a year after this movie was released, she saw it upon its original release. And then I would go up to visit her every once in a while. And I got to do all the things that my parents would never let me do. I got to drink soda and eat candy and watch movies that were probably inappropriate for me at the time, this being one of them. And so as I have grown up, this movie, I did watch it when I was 10 years old. And I'm sure there are many things that hopefully went over my head, but I've watched it so many times since then. And every single time it almost seems like there's something new that I discover about this. So yes, a number of references I didn't quite appreciate until I was older, but it's, been with me in my life, for a long time.
It's funny as you're saying that, I'm trying to think in my head, what it would have been the most inappropriate thing for a 10-year-old to see in this movie. I'm trying to think what would have been the one that just made your jaw drop, and I'm sure we'll get to it at some point.
Yeah. The first thing that stands out to me is definitely the scene where they're naked in the locker room and they have their, prosthetic penises. And that, I'm sure, the line throbbing cock, probably not appropriate for a 10-year-old. So I'm trying to remember what I thought at the time. I think it just went so over my head. But now in retrospect, I'm like, Marisa, my sister, let me watch this.
So you had a cat named Long Wanger after that because of that scene.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it was running around asking other kids at school what a vagina was.
Okay. I will give my history. Mine's a little different. That this movie came out in 1998. I was 24 years old, and I was not a fan of South Park. Are you a South Park fan, Liana?
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Colorado, and so from the moment South Park came out, my sister and my dad were huge fans. So again, that was also another situation where I grew up sort of watching it, but missing a number of the jokes. But it was, especially all the John Elway references, the Broncos references, just being in Colorado, it sort of was part of my, pop culture growing up. So yeah, I would say that South Park has always been a part of my life as well.
Did you indeed grow up in a podunk redneck mountain town?
almost. We were on the foothills on the other side, but I'd been to South Park a number of times. But yeah, I mean, it's actually really funny because I also watched other Trey Parker and Matt Stone films like Cannibal the Musical and Orgasmo. Again, as a child, which I questioned my parents' decisions and my sister's decisions. But yeah, the humor of Trey Parker, Matt Stone, and of course David Zucker, who's the writer and director of this film, have been with me, throughout my whole childhood.
Okay, yeah, that's. I didn't know you were from Colorado. Okay, that adds a different spin to this. Yeah, what happened is, again, South Park, for those who don't know, South Park came out in, 97, 98, somewhere in there. I forget exactly when. When I first saw it, I just didn't like it. That wasn't my style of comedy. It was too vulgar. And what was funny is I had a friend who I worked with in Seattle today. She was a programmer like me, and we worked in the same office. And she didn't have cable, so she's like, hey, Mario, can you tape this show, South Park, for me? And I'm like, I don't want to tape that stupid show. So I tape her these episodes, and I give it to her. And what's funny is she's like a big celebrity now. Her name is Rachel Flotard. She's the lead singer of a band named Viz Queen in Seattle. And she's like a huge name in the Seattle music scene. But so that was my introduction to South Park. I had to tape this stupid show for Rachel every week. And again, I just didn't like the show at all. And so I kind of dragged my feet when this movie came out. Again, is this the first Trey Parker, Matt Stone movie, or did the other ones come first?
The other ones came first, but this is the one. So they wrote and directed, from my understanding, those other films. So this is the first one that they were sort of acting in as just actors. I mean, I know that they contributed a lot to, unofficially to the script. But this is sort of, there's the joke in the movie about them, oh, you're going to act in a big Hollywood movie. You're such a sellout. So this was like their sort of first really big movie.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, basically, yeah, this is their first big name movie where they're not the ones who wrote it. Although I don't know if you knew this, Liana, that I was reading some research on this movie today, that it was written for Chris Farley. That cracks me up when I think about that.
That's so crazy to think about what that version of that movie would have been.
We're going to get into a little history here, that this movie is oddly important to like American comedy movies, and I didn't even realize that until I was watching it today, that it's directed by the guy David Zucker, who made Airplane, made The Naked Gun, which are pretty much the pinnacle of 80s comedies movies. And then you have Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the South Park guys, who like the pinnacle of maybe late 90s, 2000s comedy. And this is like the intersection where 80s met 2000s. And I didn't even realize that until I was watching it today, that it's like a perfect mesh of their two styles of comedy.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons why I love this movie so much, because again, my dad let me watch Airplane and, Top Secret and all those movies. And then having also now Trey Parker and Matt Stone come into it, which I am a South Park fan. It was this weird amalgam of sort of a lot of things that I appreciate about comedy, which is maybe why it stuck with me for so long.
Yeah. And again, we just I can't reiterate enough that this movie, as we know it now, is not the way it started. It was written by David Zucker, who apparently this was a game he used to play with his friends when they were kids in the neighborhood. It's just basketball for non-athletes. You don't have to run or anything. So he wrote this script. It was this thing that kicked around in Hollywood for a few years, and then Chris Farley got attached to it, and it was a Chris Farley vehicle, which again I still laugh at. And then Chris Farley died, and they're like, well, we need someone else to star in this movie. And like the flavor of the week that month happened to be South Park. It had just come out. And they're like, well, we'll get this guy, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. These guys are funny. We'll put them in the movie. We'll rewrite it for two characters. And then what's funny is I read some trivia that Trey and Matt had no intention of becoming big movie stars. They're like, well, someone will pay us to be in this movie. And like South Park's never going to make it. It's too racy for cable. It'll be canceled in 3 weeks. So let's just agree to do this movie. And then what happened is South Park became a hit, and all of a sudden they had to do a movie too that they had no interest in.
Yeah, I think I remember reading that too, that essentially they thought South Park was, for sure going to get canceled by the time this movie was going to come out. So, they're like, yeah, sure, we'll do that. There's no way South Park is going to be a big success. And then they ended up having to do both at the same time, which is just crazy. And
again, I will say, I didn't like South Park at first. I grew to love it. It's one of my favorite comedies now. I love that show with all my heart, but I didn't like it at first. But when I saw this movie, I kind of got dragged to it. I had a friend in town. We were looking for something to do. Like, we could go see BASEketball. And I remember laughing so hard at this movie. And it was not expecting, and I brought this up in my Brady Bunch movie podcast. Like, my favorite movies are the ones you have no expectations for at all, and they become really funny. Those are the ones that are so rewarding, I think.
Well, I think this movie, it has sort of those classic airplane jokes in them also. And I mean, especially the first, I think, 20 minutes, there just seems to be a gag in the background, every 3 seconds. And so there's just a lot of comedy jam-packed into this. And it's funny that you mention it because I don't think it was well received at the time it was released. I mean, it got low ratings and bad reviews, which is shocking to me. Obviously, I didn't remember any of that, but I thought it was just hilarious and just jam-packed full of comedy.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was actually going through the reviews of BASEketball today. To say it was not well received would be an understatement. Like Roger Ebert in his review, I says he wrote something like, "This is the deterioration of standards in our society." Like, people were so horrified that South Park comedy was becoming a thing in America. Like, there's almost no positive reviews of BASEketball out there. I mean, even today. I mean, it's safe to say, obviously, that comedy is probably not always for critics, and this movie obviously is not for everybody. But it's funny when you read these reviews how horrified people were that a movie like this could exist. Just the bad taste, the stuff we would become familiar with later on South Park was all kind of new here. And yeah, the critics were horrified, and again, it was a huge bomb. It didn't make any money. And I know Trey and Matt were like embarrassed by it at the time. It's just one of these things, like it was perhaps a little ahead of its time.
Yeah, it's weird to think of it as sort of a pioneering movie, but yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a reference in South Park to, asking for their money back like we did with BASEketballs, because it was just such a big flop. But now, kind of in retrospect, looking back at, sort of all of the vulgar elements that have now sort of become commonplace, now it doesn't seem as shocking, but there's a lot of insane stuff in this movie. There's like, the very first party that they go to, Brittany's mom's vibrator is shown. Like, oh my gosh, can you imagine Robert Ebert like watching that? Of course he's going to be shocked.
Yeah, and again, I will reiterate, this movie is not for everybody. I try to do movies on staff picks that I can recommend to everybody, but like, I'm not going to tell my grandma to go watch BASEketball. I don't think she's going to enjoy it. This is one, there's a certain type of humor. If you like South Park, this is up your alley. If you like airplane movies, this will be up your alley. And it's kind of interesting just thinking about this now that I was, again, a big fan of Airplane, Top Secret, The Naked Gun, all those ZAZ movies, the Zaz movies. But I've always been kind of critical of everything they did after that. Like, I never thought any of them were that funny once they split up. They kind of peaked with The Naked Gun, and that was it. But BASEketball, to me, kind of represents the last hurrah of David Zucker. Like, it almost is like the spiritual successor to Airplane, and I'll kind of get into that later. But it's like his one last chance where he really hit that edgy, dark comedy that really got people to laugh, because I don't think any of his other movies after The Naked Gun really did that.
Yeah, I can see that. And I don't know if that has to do with sort of the shifting elements in comedy, because this was sort of that mixture of bringing in, the David Zucker's brand of humor along with the Trey Parker and Matt Stone, because they were involved in some of the lines and some improvising and uncredited as writers. And I think that's why it was such a big success for us now.
And again, this movie just seems so charming and quaint now, whereas it was edgy and horrible at the time.
Yeah, that's actually funny that you bring it up, because if I actually just cherry picked some of the elements of this movie, I would say, well, you cannot say that. You cannot say that it's some sort of like, oh, that's so nice. It really is edgy, but because I don't know if it's because of the time difference from when this movie came out, now it's been 20 years, that it does seem a little like, oh, that's nice with all the craziness we have out there. But yeah, I also agree that this movie is not for everybody. Even though I was allowed to watch as a 10-year-old, you probably should not allow children to watch this movie, but it's hilarious to me and I love it.
Okay, two things before we delve into the storyline here. The first is that this movie, I believe, set a record for the most uses of the word dude in one movie. I looked it up. They use it 98 times in this movie, which I'm especially proud of.
Dude.
Yeah. And I believe this. There's some trivia that this movie invented the word derp and introduced it into the American comedy lexicon. And derp has since become a thing, and it started in this movie.
Yeah, I actually didn't know that until today when I was doing a little bit of reading, and I was shocked. But then, now like when I rewatch it, I noticed it, and that's crazy to think that that's now part of our lexicon.
And one last thing before we get into it. This is kind of a question that has bugged me for years, and everything I read is a little different on this. Who exactly wrote this movie? Because I know when it says written by David Zucker, but again, you watch these David Zucker movies after Airplane, and they're nowhere near as edgy and as biting as this one. Like, this movie has Trey and Matt's cheesy poof fingerprints all over it. Like, I know they were improvising and they were adding stuff to the scenes, but if I were to just watch this movie, I would say Trey and Matt wrote this movie. They're all over it.
Yeah, I would have to say so too. I mean, I know that they didn't get an official writing credit, but you can just tell that, yeah, their cheesy poo fingers are all over it. I mean, even the addition of the character Squeak was because of Trey Parker and Matt Stone. And I mean that, like, that's a huge element to the movie.
Yeah, and Squeak, again, at the time when I saw it in the theater, he was the character that the audience really responded to. Like, Squeak was kind of the star of the show at the time.
That's bizarre.
Yeah, it is funny. It'll be funny when we go through this and we talk about the beats, and I'll tell you which elements worked in the theater and which ones didn't. And I think you'll kind of be surprised which ones were the big pops.
Oh, perfect. I can't wait.
So we're going to delve into BASEketball here, but I will say, just a minor trivia note, that some criticism was brought to my attention the other day. I have a friend who's a big movie snob. He is a theater student, an art student, and he's like, you should do more important movies on staff picks. All you do is these frivolous comedies, nothing with any artistic value, nothing that's important. So in my response, we are now going to talk about BASEketball.
True artistic, representation here. I think this is a perfect pick.
Now, like I did with Top Secret, we're just going to skim through the plot here because the plot of this movie isn't that important. It's really the comedic stuff that's the big deal. So we're just going to skim through the plot, and then I've asked Liana to come up with a list of maybe her 10 things that stood out about it that really make her laugh that she wanted to bring up. So we'll each have a list of 10 things, and we'll just go into them. Just little things maybe we caught over the years that really stand out about this movie. You cool with that?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So BASEketball is the story. True story, again, since this was a real sport. And again, this movie kind of led to some BASEketball leagues that sprung up, some neighborhood leagues and stuff after the movie. I don't know if a lot of people know that. But yeah, this actually became a little thing after the movie came out.
Huh, that's cool. I think I remember trying to get my friends to play it, but of course they have sensible families who wouldn't let them watch this movie and had no idea what I was talking about.
So yeah, BASEketball is the story of these two losers, Coop and Reamer. That's Trey Parker and Matt Stone, of course, who are at a party one night, and they're just total losers from the same losers they were in high school. They just hang around and drink beer and do nothing, just total, again, South Park. We know this humor. And they're invited to a party with a bunch of successful people they went to school with, and basically they're embarrassed. They've never done anything with their lives. They have nothing to show for themselves. Everyone is embarrassed that they're even there. Matt Stone gets caught licking his prospective girlfriend's mother's vibrator. That was a good scene for a 10-year-old, by the way.
Yeah. Again, I'm pretty sure I didn't really know what was happening, but my sister's laughing, so I think I'll laugh too.
Oh, it's a little toy. Look, it's a buzzing toy.
Yeah. Oh, I have no idea what that is.
It's a Happy Meal prize.
Yeah, that and Reamer drinking from the bidet. I think I knew what a bidet was, so I might have gotten that one, but definitely not the vibrator.
Okay, so Trey and Matt go outside, and they're kind of bummed that they're at this party. They don't fit in, and outside they're challenged by these two preppy lads to a game of basketball. And Trey and Matt are not athletes, of course. Well, we're going to get killed because these guys are like absolute studs at basketball. So they decide on the spot they're going to make up this game where basically we just shoot the ball and we don't have to run or play defense or anything. Basically, it's just shooting because we can do that.
Well, they get challenged. They're all the dudes, the Wasps also want to put a bet on it. And so, they're like, what about $20? And then Cooper is like, well, let's make it 50. And then there's this line. This didn't make my list, but I just love it, so I'm gonna say it anyway. It's like, dude, we don't have $50. We don't have 20. I don't know. That always makes me laugh.
No, there's just so many little, just aside jokes, comments that are funny in this movie, and that's the thing. It's not really set up punchline. It's really just you're watching it for Trey and Matt just be themselves. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the parts of the movie that really make me laugh, there isn't sort of that really big gut busting laugh, even though I may laugh that way, but it's always to these really subtle lines.
And there's one I wanted to mention in particular, since you mentioned that it's later in the movie when Baxter Kane says to Matt Stone, "Can you break a 20?" And Matt's like, "$?" Just love the way he says that. Okay. So we have this big game. It's a BASEketball that they've made up. It's basically basketball with baseball rules where you just shoot from different areas of the court and you get a double, single, home run, whatever. And then we get the fun part, and this is the thing that everyone tends to remember about BASEketball, the psyche-outs. And this, to me, when I watch this movie, I love this so much. And even watching it now, this is so fun. This to me, I would assume you're going to agree with this. The psyche-outs are like the lifeblood of this movie.
Yeah, I would agree. It's such a good vehicle for including these little weird, really silly, really goofy, really bizarre elements of humor that you can just write in, because every psych out is only a second long, 2 seconds long.
Yeah, it's perfect. And again, they're just nonsensical. And again, if you haven't seen this movie, to paint the picture in your head, it's a psych out is where Trey and Matt can go up to you and say something in your face or do something to try to distract you during the shot. And yeah, as the movie goes along, they're going to get more and more bizarre. But the one here I think they're using at the start is they just say, Ted Nugent, which makes no sense. And there's one later with Steve Perry, and where they get an actual debate if they should use a Journey psych out or not. And it's such a odd style of comedy that didn't really exist in the 90s yet until South Park.
Yeah, dude, I said no more Journey psych outs.
I should have been gone.
Yeah, it's so bizarre. I would have loved to have seen the ones that fell on the cutting room floor, because the fact that you're using Ted Nugent as a psych out. What? If
you want a funny video, if you haven't seen BASEketball before, or if you haven't seen it in a long time, just go to YouTube and there's videos of every psych out in BASEketball just in one video. And it's one of the funniest things. And again, not all of them hit, but the ones that don't hit, or even you can kind of see where they're going with it. It's just Trey and Matt just effing around with the conventions of comedy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's yeah, it's just such a bizarre element, but I'm really happy that it was included.
Okay, so they've invented this game called BASEketball, and it was kind of cool. They actually win, even though they shouldn't have won. And then they go home and they're like, well, let's practice this. We'll make this a thing. And they decide they're going to make it a 3-man sport, and they pull in their friend, this little, I hesitate to think of the right word to describe him. Squeak. How would you describe Squeak Scolari to someone who's never seen him before?
Yeah, it's so that actor whose name I can't remember now, he's been in a number of their films that they had done previously, and I know he's done a couple voices for South Park, but Squeak is he's 4 feet tall. He's very tiny. The fact that they just call him, Lil Bitch is probably the best way I can think to describe him.
Yeah, they're forever hurling insults and just lack of respect for Squeak the entire movie. It's just crap on the little dude, and he's such an odd-looking person. Again, he's 4 feet tall. And just as a random aside for people who like the WTF trivia, watch the movie Galaxy Quest sometimes when Squeak randomly shows up as one of the aliens. He just pops up.
Wait, actually?
Yeah, he's in there. He's a Thermian.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah, it's the only time I've seen him outside a Trey and Matt movie.
Huh. All right. Well, now I have a new game for when I watch Galaxy Quest next.
Yeah, so anyway, this guy comes. They call him Squeak. They also call him Bitch, Little Bitch. They have all sorts of little names for him. And then at one point, it's revealed that his name is Kenny. And I will say, when I was in the theater in 1998, that got a huge laugh out of the audience that there's a character named Kenny in the South Park guys movie.
Well, right, because that's at the time when South Park was, had just made it huge, made it big. And so the fact there was a character named Kenny, I'm sure was hilarious.
Yeah. So anyway, they pull Squeak in, and there's all this stuff with him moving in. Again, we'll just skip over that for now. But eventually, BASEketball becomes a thing. It becomes this big regional thing where people are playing it in the neighborhood, and they form teams and stuff. And it's a really cool game. It's got a big following. And then we introduce the character of, what is his name here? Ted Denslow, the billionaire, played by the well-respected Ernest Borgnine, who comes in. He's this billionaire. He wants to form a league. He likes seeing this BASEketball. He's going to put together a league and turn them into a professional sport. And really, the movie takes off from here when it becomes professional.
Right. So this is where they go from just playing on the streets, playing in their local leagues, to actually making this, glamorous BASEketball league.
And there's a wonderful cameo here. You know who I'm talking about as the announcer during the first BASEketball game in the neighborhood?
In the very first one, when they're just playing in the neighborhood?
They're just playing in the neighborhood before Ted Denslow shows up. There's a random announcer who I just completely forgot was in this movie.
No, who is it?
Kato Kalin from the OJ trial shows up as the BASEketball announcer for about 3 seconds.
That's fantastic. Oh man, they were able to pull a lot of great people for this movie, I will say, those random cameos.
Yeah.
So that's funny that I never noticed him there.
Yeah, I'm surprised Kato was available. I'm glad they were able to get him.
Right, I'm sure, booked for days.
And there's a joke here in this movie I have to point out, that when Joe Cooper makes his first BASEketball, he makes it out of his recliner and it says Lazy Boy. I've seen this movie dozens of times, and for years I didn't even realize that was a reference to the movie The Natural, where he makes the bat Wonder Boy.
Mm-hmm,
So yeah, so it's one of these jokes, I don't know if it really hit, but there's a Natural reference in there that I never got.
It's just layers upon layers, because at first you think it's just, he just cut up his lazy boy recliner.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Again, it's not the best joke, but I'm just pointing out something that I missed for many years.
Those reviewers clearly didn't get the layers of comedy in this film.
Yes. Okay, yeah, so Ernest Borgnine comes and wants to turn them into a professional league, and there's a great quote here. I have to read this word for word just because I love the wording of it. He goes, "You kids with your loud music and your Dan Fogelberg and your Zima and your hula hoops and your Pac-Man video games."
Oh my God, that's one of my favorite lines of all time. That's in my list. Because the Dan Fogelberg one and Zima, I can't not laugh at that line.
Yeah, and I was going to say, that's such a Trey Parker and Matt Stone. I know they wrote that line. David Zucker did not write that line.
Oh, for sure. And you can see Trey Parker, turn, and he's like, Dan Fogelberg. He, mouths the words Dan Fogelberg. It's so good.
So, basically, the next hour of the movie is the Professional Basketball League, and they become a team called the Milwaukee Beers, and they play in Beers Stadium, or Beer Garden, I believe it is, Beers Garden. Mm-hmm. And the team is made up of the Airman, Joe Cooper, Sir Swish, Doug Reamer, and then the little bitch, Kenny Scolari. And this is the thing that always bothers me about this movie. Why does every team have a 4-man bench of reserve players?
I have no idea. Especially because this isn't a sport. Literally the point of this sport is anyone can play. So you're not going to get injured playing basketball and need to call up someone from the reserve. But yeah, there's just this sort of extra cast of characters hanging out in the dugout that we never see play.
Yeah. Because that's literally the sport, just the same 3 people shooting baskets over and over. And the announcers, they get some wonderful announcers in this movie. They get, Bob Costas, Al Michaels. These are all real sports announcers, and they get them to say horrible, horrible things in the movie. I don't know how much they paid them to say some of these things.
I have no idea. I can't imagine Bob Costas and Al Michaels, respected sports commentators looking back. So the things that they said in this movie, which I'm sure we'll get to, are just beyond anything I would have expected from them.
Yeah, Al Michaels is just drooling over these cheerleaders, and I have to mention the cheerleaders. Again, there's certain elements of this movie, perhaps not for everyone. Maybe this is not the most inclusive movie ever made, but I do appreciate that every team that's 3 people, and they're based in a city, and the city is some horrible stereotype about that city. It's completely South Park humor. I have to mention the San Francisco Ferries right off the top of my head, which was so blatant, and just a blatant gay joke that they just throw in there and they go completely over the top with it. But yeah, and every team's got the cheerleaders that match the team. There's a team, the New Jersey Informants, who are just a bunch of greasy Italians. And again, as a greasy Italian myself, I appreciated this. And their cheerleaders are just these greasy Italian Jersey girls. And all the stereotypes are so over the top.
Yeah, I think it's the Dallas Felons is another one, and I think the Miami Dealers is one. I think my favorite, though, and this is really subtle, I have this on my list, but I'm just going to talk about it now. The Detroit team, they're called the Detroit Lemons, which is just so subtle because they're never really mentioned. You just see it on their uniforms, and for some reason, the subtlety of that and then the dig at Detroit cars just really makes me happy.
Yeah, I like, and again, the timeline of this movie when it came out. I love the LA riots. Because for people who might not know, the LA riot was a big thing that happened during the Rodney King trial, which was not too far before BASEketball. This movie only came out a couple years after. So an LA riot joke was rather edgy at the time.
Yeah, well, I feel like there are a couple of jokes that, because the whole, and this may be getting ahead of myself, but later in the movie there's this sweatshop thing, but that was supposed to be a Kathy Lee Gifford joke, right?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, okay. To include something like that is classic South Park, right? Where they do the episodes and do everything within that week so they can be so topical. This was sort of like a weird movie version of that, trying to get all that stuff in.
Yeah, it's just so many things I want to talk about, but we'll just skim through this here. Okay, so we have the first professional basketball league, and in the opening season, the Bears lose. They choke in the final game when their owner, Denslow, dies. He chokes on a hot dog, and Coop gets distracted. He gets psyched out by his best friend dying. And there's a great line. And then, they all get pelted by the Milwaukee fans are so angry they've choked in the championship game. They start throwing eggs at them, which leads Bob Costas to the wonderful quote, "What an unfortunate thing to happen on Dozen Egg Night."
Yeah, the beautiful thing about the professional basketball sort of world is you have these extremely stereotypical and offensive names for the teams. You have these very slutty cheerleaders, I guess, or dancers. The refs are on rollerblades. They always have weird themed nights, like dozen egg night, like free range chicken night. So everything is just, it's so surreal and bizarre. And it's really funny.
Yeah, and there's one of my favorite lines. This is something I was going to mention in my 10 things, but I just have to mention it. I'll probably forget if I don't, where Joe Cooper has choked the championship game, and he's like, I got psyched out, man. This sucks, or something. And and Reamer goes, yeah, if anyone should get the psych out, it should be Denslow. And Cooper's like, dude, weak.
Weak. And when he's choking on the hot dog, and so Cooper is trying to give him like CPR or something, and Denslow, so he's choking on a hot dog, and he still has the bun, and he kind of like points at the bun to indicate that he's choking, and Cooper's like, oh no, I'm sorry, Mr. Denslow, they stopped selling hot dogs after the like third inning. Get this man a hot dog.
Yeah, so that's the end of Ernest Borgnine. We're going to meet a couple other secondary characters. I don't really have much to say about them. Yasmine Bleeth as the director of the Second Chance Dream Come True Foundation.
Dream Come True. Mm-hmm.
And then Jenny McCarthy takes a break from her schedule of murdering children to come and star in a movie, so that was nice.
So nice of her.
Yeah, although there is a nice running theme in the movie of cruelty to dying children, which it had to be all, I mean, that's all Kenny dying in South Park. That's such a Trey Parker and Matt Stone thing at the time, and we'll see this time and time again in this movie where horrible things happen to dying children.
It's just so funny. Oh my gosh, I can't believe that Roger Ebert didn't appreciate the dying children jokes.
Yeah. Okay, so we skim through the season, blah, 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 and good things happen, bad things happen. Basically, there's an evil billionaire named Baxter Kane who's going to try to take over the league and add all these endorsements and clothing lines and stuff, and he's just everything that's against basketball. So it becomes the story of the young, cool guys, Joe and Reamer, or Coop and Reamer against Kane. And am I skipping over anything here? I know there's a lot of details, but I want to get to those in our lists at the end.
Yeah, I think that's the big picture. I think that's probably good enough.
What happens here? So there's a subplot with Yasmine Bleeth runs this charity for the dying kids, and they're constantly trying to fight for her affection, so they're going to do nice things for her dying children. They don't really care, I don't think. They just are trying to woo Yasmine Bleeth, which I appreciate. Anything specific you want to mention before we get to kind of our 10 things here? I want to wrap this up quick because there's a lot to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I guess let's see. So you have sort of this, so Denslow dies, leaves the team in control to Cooper, and so that's what this sort of warring faction between the evil guy Baxter Kane who wants to make all this money, and then you have Cooper who's sort of holding out for all of this, and that's where a lot of the conflict sort of in the second half of the movie comes from, is just sort of them, like you said, battling against each other.
Okay, and then we get a subplot kind of towards the end where Coop and Reamer get turned against one another. One of them is lured by the fact that all his money's going to be thrown at him, and then Cooper's holding out, and they end up fighting. And so at the end of the movie, basically, Coop and Reamer come together. They resolve their differences. At one point, they're framed for running a children's sweatshop, which, again, was very topical at the time because that's what Kathy Lee Gifford was doing. And Coop goes and fixes that, and then they come together, they win the championship game, and they save the league, and they defy Baxter Kane, and basically it's a happy ever after. Anything major I'm leaving out there?
No, I think that's a major plot line.
Okay, that being said, the plot of BASEketball is not the important part. The important thing are the gags and the lines and the quotes and the jokes, and this is the part that I'm really interested in doing. So, Liana and I have prepared a list of 10 things each that we really love about BASEketball, that just jump out to us, that we find so funny. And I will give you the honor. Please lead us off this list with something that you really love about BASEketball.
Oh, I do feel so honored. So I'm going to start, these are in no particular order for me, but I'm going to start with, at the very beginning, sort of how BASEketball comes about. There's this monologue about teams moving places and just doing everything for money, which is, sort of the whole conflict later in the film. But there's this one line that just makes me laugh every single time. It's because they're talking about the teams moving. And so it's the Lakers move to LA where they don't have lakes. The Oilers moved to Tennessee where they don't have oil, and the Jazz moved to Utah where they don't allow music. That line, the Jazz moved to Utah where they don't allow music, I don't know, it kills me every single time. Whenever I think about the Utah Jazz, I just think, oh, it's like the tiny town of Footloose. No dancing, no music.
See, this is why I'm glad I had you on the podcast, because you went to the Footloose joke before I could go there. Well done.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm sure as a Coloradan, you are more than happy to see jokes made at Utah's expense. They're neighbors.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Let's throw them under the bus.
Okay, for my number one, I'm going to have, this is a very subtle sight gag, and again, it's hard to say that anything in BASEketball is subtle, but this is one that will never not make me laugh. There's a scene where the evil billionaire, Baxter Kane, is trying to seduce Matt Stone, Doug Reamer, to buy into his new league with all this endorsements and stuff. So there's this great scene where Matt Stone shows up in Baxter's museum, and like every single thing Baxter says, Matt doesn't understand, and Baxter's getting increasingly more and more frustrated. And then at one point they're walking down a little hallway, and Baxter's explaining all these things that Matt's going to get if he plays ball. And just randomly, Matt Stone ends up on an escalator and just starts going down. It's one of these stupid sight gags. And that's got to be a David Zucker. That seems like an airplane type joke. It's just Matt Stone and Robert Vaughn walking towards the camera, and all of a sudden Matt starts going down while he's still listening to the conversation, and he disappears in frame at the frame bottom. And I just love that gag.
And what's great is that he's nodding like he's listening as he's going down the escalator. Yeah. Well, so that's actually funny because that brings me to another one on my list, because in that same scene, when he's in the museum before, there's a cameo from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who is sitting in a glass cage thing. And then later you see him come and clock out like with his time card. That whole, like, just having that in there always just makes me laugh.
Yeah, it's the look on Kareem's face when he's just sitting there on display. He's sitting in this little glass case. And again, I mentioned earlier that this is kind of the spiritual successor to the airplane movies, the Naked Gun movies. And this is what I was really talking about, is that Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a friend of the Zuckers. He's in Airplane. He plays the pilot. And then Reggie Jackson is in the Naked Gun. And then he shows up here again. And then you have all these announcers, these famous announcers, which is something they literally did in the Naked Gun. They're just doing that again. Then you have Robert Stack, who showed up in Airplane, shows up here. So it's really all the Zucker brothers' greatest hits showing up here. That's why I kind of call this the spiritual successor.
Yeah, they're calling in all their favors.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so here's my number two. There are many quotes in this movie, but if I were to go 10 years without seeing BASEketball, there is one that I would still be able to quote off the top of my head, and that's because it has worked its way into my vocabulary over the years. And that is Trey Parker saying, "Oh."
Yeah, my sister and I still do that to each other. We'll say,
I'd never heard that in a movie. I've never heard Trey Parker do it since. But that's his thing. Every time something horrible happens to him, he just kind of looks at it and goes, "Oh." And it gets repeated like 12 times during the movie, and it's always funny. And like I said, that's the one thing. Everyone remembers the psyche-outs. I remember, "Oh."
Yeah. Oh my God. That definitely, if there is a part of the movie that I quote the most, by far it is the that's so good. Well, that was also on my list, but there's another quote that is, I don't know why it makes me laugh, and every once in a while I still say it to my sister, but it's when at the very beginning when they're challenged to this game, the basketball game, and they're sort of making it up.
Yeah. And
their very first description is you stand there, you take a shot, and if you miss, you get a letter. And the Wasp was like, "Oh, so it's like horse." And Trey Parker just goes, "No, it's not like horse." There's something about the way he says it that it just kills me inside. So sometimes my sister and I will be talking, and it'll be different. You'll be like, "Oh, so it's, it's like it's like taking out the trash." No, it's not like taking out the trash.
Duh.
So, duh. Like we just say, dude. So I don't know why, but that makes me laugh.
Okay, I'm going to go for my number 3 here, and this is one where it's just a question. Why is it that the psych out makes a person fall over? I've always loved that about this movie, and that's something that I read a lot of reviews in 1998 that they hated about this movie, that was just stuck in people's craw, that someone gets psyched out and they fall over. Like, why do they fall over?
Yeah, that's the thing about the psych-outs that really doesn't make any sense. Like, you are so physically terrorized by what's happening that you throw the ball far away and you fall over. It's just so exaggerated that's what makes it so ridiculous. Oh my gosh. So I think there are a number of really great psych-outs in this movie, but one of the ones that I really like is it's at that beginning, the very first game that they play, and it's a psych out where Coop takes a Polaroid picture of so there's like a flash, it gets in the guy's eye, and Matt Stone's like right in there with his thumbs up, and then Cooper hands the wasp guy the photo. Like there's something about like, oh, you got your photo taken at an amusement park, here's your picture.
Okay, I think we're on 4 here, I'm not sure. But there's a scene, and again, it's maybe not the funniest thing in the movie, but I'm such a fan of Trey Parker, and again, this is why it hurts me over the years to say I didn't like South Park at the time, but I've come to love him. I just love little ways he says stuff, writes stuff, songs he does. The scene where he's doing a psych-out on the Detroit Lemons, and he does it all in mime. That is one of the funniest things I've ever seen in a movie, his little mime psych-out. And again, it's just, Trey Parker's so good at so many little things. He's like a good mime. Who knew that this guy could mime? But it's just one of these little things that makes me laugh when I watch that scene.
He's just so talented. That is one of the weirder ones. That along with where he just takes the ball of aluminum foil and like balls it and just like is gonna stick it in his mouth. And again, that causes the guy to fall over. But yeah, why? Like, I would love to have seen the brainstorming session for the psych-outs. Like, where did miming fall on the list? Was that like, we gotta do it?
Yeah, miming creeps people out. Dwarves spinning plates creeps people out. Like, what's going on?
I have no idea. That's so good. So I think another one that really just stands out to me. So we talked about this about Squeak or Lil Bitch getting made fun of. That's a consistent thing throughout the whole episode. Even the psych-outs are like, like Squeak fucked your mom. And that's the psych-out, right? Because that grosses people out. But when he moves into their house in the very beginning, he has this great line that's, I swear, you guys rip on me like 13 or 14 more times and I'm out of here.
Yeah, I had that in my notes. I had that in my notes too. I love that line. Fool me 14 times, shame on me.
Yeah.
Okay, here's an underrated one. This is one I don't know if people would remember unless you watched this movie recently, where, again, just Al Michaels and Bob Costas saying the most horrible things. Like, Michaels is drooling over these underage cheerleaders and stuff, and then there's a scene in the championship game where it's like the big pressure moment, the last shot of the season. Cooper's either going to win it, sink the shot, and save the league, or he's going to choke. And Bob Costas goes, "It all comes down to this. Coop sinks this shot, he wins the cup, and the Bears get to keep the team." And then Al Michaels just adds, "Or he misses."
Yeah.
It's such an underplayed line. I just love the way he delivers that.
It's so perfect also because it's a play on, those dramatic sports movies of, oh, if they get this final goal or whatever. And then, yeah, Al Michaels like, or he doesn't. But they have so many lines that are just ridiculous and hilarious and so out of character, I feel like, for the two of them. And so that was one of the things on my list was all of these lines. So one of them is when they're talking about the dancers, and Al Michaels, Bob Costas like, "Oh, it's hard to believe 5 years ago this league was just starting." And Al Michaels goes, "Hard to believe just 5 years ago those girls were only in grade school." And then there's another one later after they win when Bob Costas goes like, "You're excited. You should feel these nipples."
Yeah, very well respected. Yeah.
Yeah, did Bob Costas just say that? It's like I just watched him covering the Olympics, and now, like, what?
Feel these nipples.
Yeah.
I'm going to mention one that I don't want to steal your thunder because I guarantee you were going to mention this one. But I have to say it because this is maybe my favorite scene in the movie where all this rain of shit has come down on Joe Cooper's head. Everything bad has happened to him. He's lost his league. He's lost his girlfriend. And he's going for a drive. And I know you know which scene I'm about to talk about. Yeah. He's going for a drive. And it's one of these like in Rocky or Rocky 2 or especially Rocky 4. There's a montage where Stallone will go driving and he'll think about all the bad things that have happened to him and he'll get psyched up. So Trey is driving down the street and he's sitting in his car and this song comes on the radio that's oddly specific to his life. Like it basically goes over the plot of the movie right down to and an evil billionaire is trying to take over your league. It's like my favorite scene in the movie because I'd never seen like a joke like that in a movie where they're listening to the radio and it's clearly, I mean, that's Trey Parker singing the song. And this is the type of humor they would do later, like in Team America and the South Park movie. But it's kind of a precursor to the type of stuff they would do on the show. Just the oddly specific radio song that completely describes the plot of what's going on.
Yeah, I think my favorite line from that song is when I think the lyric is something like "There's a truck changing lanes up ahead" or something like that. That is like very, very specific to that exact moment in time, which is just another layer to it, which makes me happy.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what we're talking about, that's the song I opened the show with. That's the oddly specific song is the opening to this episode.
Yes. Okay, so another one that I had on my list is and there are a number of these throughout, but it's with Jenny McCarthy's character and the evil millionaire guy, Baxter Kane, I think is his name, so Jenny McCarthy's character was sort of this, she married Ernest Borgnine's character for like 3 months. She's this clear gold digger sort of character. And so the billionaire is making these sexual innuendos like laying carpet or having his lobby buffed or polishing his chrome. And then you see Jenny McCarthy actually doing those things. Like she's actually laying carpet and actually buffing his lobby of his building.
Yeah, that's definitely a David Zucker joke, that one.
That's exactly, yeah. That one is such a classic, and I'm happy that it's in there. Okay.
So another little one. This is just a visual gag, and this is something people wouldn't remember unless you have seen the movie. But there's a scene where there's a there's a sweatshop in Calcutta that's producing all their shoes, and Cooper has to go and fix it because it's producing all this negative press for the league. So he shows up in Calcutta. He gets in a cab. Of course, there's a goat in the cab, and he goes, oh, to the goat.
Yeah.
And then he goes to the sweatshop where all these little Indian kids are working. They're like little 5-year-old kids making shoes. And I love the visual gag that all the Indian kids are wearing hard hats, except they're shaped like turbans. It's a hard hat turban. That's a joke right there.
It's such a subtle joke because you totally miss it unless you're really paying attention because they're yellow.
Yeah.
They look like hard hats, but no, they're designed to be like turbans. Oh my gosh. Well, speaking of hats, so in the very first Denslow Cup, which is the championship that the Beers team actually loses, you can see the winning team, the Dallas team, they have these championship hats and shirts on, and then you cut to the Beers and they're wearing these loser shirts. Like literally the hat just says loser, and then the shirt has losers and then a picture of the Denslow Cup but with a big red circle and a slash through it. It's never talked about, but it's just a really, it's a sight gag that's in there that is just, it's a wonderful attention to detail. I think it's hilarious.
That was actually on my list too. I'm glad you brought that one up. Okay, here we go. I will tell you the moment that got the biggest pop in the theater when I saw this in the theater. Can you guess? I am curious. What moment in this movie do you think got a huge reaction from the audience?
I'm gonna say it's definitely not the can I call you pig fucker line? Only my friends can call me pig fucker. I'm gonna go that wasn't that one.
It was not that one, no. No, the big moment where there's two parts in this movie, and again, you have to remember that South Park was this huge phenomenon at the time. It had just come out. It was in its absolute peak, probably the highest audience it had ever had. And there's two scenes in this movie where Trey Parker directly references South Park, besides from the Kenny, joke, the Kenny, the name of Squeak.
When he does the voices?
Yes, it's the when they do the voices.
Okay.
The first one is when he's talking to Reamer at one point, and Reamer's talking about how he loves kids. And Trey just seamlessly goes into Mr. Garrison's voice, where he says, I'm sorry, I forgot that Doug Reamer cares about kids. And it's exactly Mr. Garrison's voice. And that got a big laugh. But the big one is the Cartman voice at the end. Mm-hmm. Oh, my God, this is one of the biggest audience pops I had ever seen in a theater. And again, it seems silly to think about a movie like BASEketball getting this huge reaction, but South Park was a big deal, and Cartman was the star of South Park. And at the end of the movie, Trey Parker has to do his big psych-out on this guy on the Dallas Felons. I forget his name, Grumsky or something like that. This big fat guy. So they're like, psych him out by telling him he's fat. And Trey's like, no, I can't tell someone he's fat. That's weak, dude. And they're like, no, just do it really subtly. So, yeah, Parker goes up there, and I wish I could do a Cartman impression to do this justice, but I can't. But he starts going to, hey, I'm fucking fat, I'm Grunsky, I'm fucking fat, and he does it in this exact Eric Cartman voice, and that got such a huge pop in the theater, and to this day, I love that scene when I watch it. It's so funny to watch Trey Parker doing Cartman.
Yeah, and it's really funny to see, because he also has this sort of physicality to it that, I'm sure he's doing to do the psych out, but I like to think that whenever he does the Cartman voice, that's what he looks like.
Yeah.
Because he sort of tucks his chin in and bends over. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, you get to see behind the curtain a little bit there of what it's like to do Eric Cartman.
Exactly. That's what Trey looks like in the studio when he records Cartman's voice. Okay, so my last two are quotes that I just love. And so this one is when Baxter is trying to convince Cooper to sign on to, doing this, I don't know if it's a clothing line deal or whatever, but Cooper just says, well, if you want unanimous consent, you're going to have to get it from one of the other owners. That's just, that silliness is just, it's great.
The only flaw I've ever had with that line is I don't like how Robert Vaughn repeats it. Like, the joke works great, and then they have to do, that's the David Zucker thing. I'm like, stop doing that. Just let the joke sit. It worked great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
What's funny is I have like 5 more here, so I'm trying to cram through here. There's so many things. Okay, let's see.
I know.
How about when they go to the dying kid, the Dream Come True Foundation or whatever, and they come and they can make any wish they want, and Coop and Reamer will try to grant it. And Trey Parker says, the league wants to make your dream come true, provided it's not a miracle cure or something.
And then what's great is the kid goes on to list a couple things, and it's like big game hunting, poisoning the reservoir, Chelsea Clinton.
Little dying kid, he wants to nail Chelsea Clinton. That's his final wish.
Yeah, to which Reamer responds, he'd have a better shot at Bill.
Yeah, and that was one of my other things. That's literally one of the things the kid wants. He wants to hunt and kill a bald eagle. He wants to kill an endangered species. And that's the type of joke I know Trey and Matt wrote. That's not a David Zucker. That's absolutely a South Park joke right there. The dying kid jokes.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Oh, my gosh. So we can continue to go through your list. I'm loving this, just us retelling jokes we think are funny. But the last quote that sometimes I use every once in a while is if Cooper says this, but if I had a nickel for every time this ball pulled me out of a tight spot, I'd have a shitload of nickels. If I had a nickel for every time this happened, I'd have a shitload of nickels.
Okay, and I'll continue in that vein that there's the scene where obviously 10-year-old Liana was very impressed by when we see there's a locker room scene where Trey and Parker are hugely endowed. Like at one point they kind of cut and you see these enormous wangs going down to the floor, and it's really stupid. But what's funny is that what I love about this movie is they continue that joke through the rest of the scene. It's not so much that they just have these huge genitalia. There's one part where in the middle of the conversation where Trey Parker turns around towards Robert Vaughn and you see part of his genitals go flying towards Vaughn, and Vaughn has to like duck to get out of the way. And it's just, I love that they kept that in. They kept going with the joke through the whole scene.
Well, and there's that sound effect of it like hitting the table or hitting the ground too. And what's funny is that because you don't notice it at the beginning, they're just in the locker room, and you see them from the waist up. So, you're just not quite sure that they're naked. But then as the scene goes on, it's just they continue to roll with the joke.
Okay, so you have no more. Your list is tapped. Do you have anything else you specifically wanted to mention? I know you've got to have a couple others.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So I love all the shade that's thrown at Texas. So when the sports are sort of in dire straits, they had to recruit from prisons, mental institutions, and Texas. And then when Texas wins the Denslow Cup, there's a newscaster and he's talking about the fans celebrating, and it's just shots of riots. And it's like 13 injured, 4 dead. Something like that.
Here you go. Here's one on my list. It's the very subtle necrophilia joke in here that where Squeak is going to psych out one of the big guys on the LA riots, and he says, "Your mother's deaf," and the guy's like, "My mother's dead, you little twerp," and Squeak's like, "Oh, I guess that's why she didn't move around a lot." There you go.
You always needed some necrophilia in there.
Roger Ebert loved that joke.
Just loved that joke. There's before they play a game, they end up taking that Make-A-Wish kid or whatever out, and they end up going to a bar and just taking a bunch of tequila shots. And then afterwards, there's a bunch of references to them being drunk and being compared to certain celebrities. So there's one line that's like, "He's 1 for 11 and smells like Christian Slater," or "He's 8 years old and smells like Robert Downey Jr." I also would have loved to have seen the list of celebrities that they were considering.
Yeah, we know that
for those jokes.
We know that South Park is not shy about throwing shade at celebrities.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, that was Robert Downey Jr.'s reputation at the time, this burnout in Hollywood who just basically drank and drugged himself to death. So that you might not get that now knowing him as Iron Man, but at the time that was very much a topical joke.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying, that it does have that sort of South Park topical element to it, which really now watching it now 20 years later, you might miss some stuff, but at the time, I like to think it was on topic.
Okay, so here's just a little reaction shot that I always love. It's the reading of Denslow's will, where Ernest Borgnine has died, and you're hearing his videotaped will, and at one point he says, "Coop," and Trey Parker's got the biggest shit-eating grin on his face. He's like, "Yes, Mr. Denslow," completely forgetting that he's talking to a recording, and I love this little look that Trey Parker can do. He does one very similar in another scene where it's like a montage where they're raking leaves with Yasmin Bleeth, and he just turns and smiles at the camera, the most pleasant, happy smile possible, and it's just this look that really only Trey Parker can do.
Oh my god, yeah, that just really goofy, over-the-top, stupid smile looking thing. I don't know how he does it, but he pulls it off, and it's hilarious. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that really stands out. I mean, I have a bunch of jokes written down, but do they dare grace my top whatever? We're doing 15 now.
I will give you the honor of talking about the unsolved mysteries scene, because I know everybody mentions that scene as being one of the funniest.
Yeah. So Cooper goes to Calcutta to sort out the whole sweatshop thing, and there's this entire element where it's unsolved mysteries, and they're talking about Cooper going over there, and there are just so many really great lines about it, like this came from a neighbor so-and-so who asked not to be identified. And then you can see in the background there's solitaire being played on a number of the computers, and then later, after he comes back, after he wins the game, and he's on screen on the unsolved mysteries, and they're still like, we still have no idea where the fuck this guy is. Yeah. It's literally on screen.
Yeah, and again, Robert Stack, just like Al Michaels and Bob Costas, being paid to say these horrible things that he normally wouldn't say. Very serious actor.
Yeah, and he's so stoic when he does it, just keeping that same, sort of very serious tone, delivering these hilariously ridiculous lines.
If I were Joe Cooper's girlfriend, I'd love to cuddle in the spoon position.
It's throwing the glass of water on him because he's clearly getting off track. Okay. Yeah, it's great.
Here we go. One of the last scenes in the movie, there's the Malacca Lacca Board of Trust, which I mentioned earlier. And I just love the blatant racism in this scene where it's supposed to, the tribute, the big theme of this evening, that's like the halftime show in the championship game, is like white oppression of the natives. And so they have Trey and Matt dressed up as natives. Squeak is dressed up as their good luck pineapple. And then the Dallas Felons are their white colonial oppressors. This is the theme of the halftime show. It's like colonialization.
Yeah, and it's above the Lagoon of Peace, but they're still the white oppressors, explicitly said. It fits with the racism in the rest of the movie. Okay.
I got two more. I'll run through them real quick here. And one is we just mentioned the Lagoon of Peace. There's a real quick Titanic reference in this movie. I don't know if you caught it when Trey and Matt are about to fall into the Lagoon of Peace when the Malacca Lacca Board of Trust falls. And one of them says, "Hold your breath till just before we hit," and the other one says, "Never let go." And it happens real quick. I don't know if people catch that. And again, Titanic had just come out a year before. Very topical.
No, actually, I didn't catch that now. But I can picture the scene. Yeah. I'll have to go back and listen.
And I have to point out, I'm not going to mention a lot about it, but the chicken vacuum, where in the background of one scene on Free Range Chicken Night, there's cleaners vacuuming up chickens and making them explode, which I love.
Oh, it's so good. So there's chickens everywhere, which is hilarious. And then, so it's there's an interview, there's a conversation going on, and this is a really subtle background gag, but the crew is cleaning up and they suck up a chicken. So you see it get sucked up into this tube, and then they continue walking, and there's like a, I don't know what the word for it is, but I think of it as like a wood chipper kind of, and you see the chicken get sucked into it, and then a bunch of feathers just shoot out of the top. That's how they chose to clean up free-range chicken night.
The chicken chipper.
Yeah, the chicken chipper.
Yeah. And that's right after a little kid has asked Doug to sign his chicken. "Hey, Doug, can you sign my chicken?" Just so many dumb little background jokes and quotes. And I'm going to end on an especially racy one just because I love ending on stuff like this. The vagina joke. We have to talk about this because it's a great joke. It's absolutely not politically correct. This is a horrible joke to have in a movie. And I love that not only do they go for it, they have a callback to it later in the movie, which I love. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll let you set the stage if you'd like. This is a delicate theme here.
Oh, you're going to make me handle it? I don't think so.
I don't want the hate mail. Okay, fine. I'll go for it.
This is all you.
Okay, so they're playing a team called the San Francisco Fairies, which if you've seen
Great
South
start.
Park, yeah, again, it's not really, this joke wouldn't be as topical now, but like in the 80s and 90s, that was the reputation of San Francisco. It was a incredibly gay city. That was the thing. Now it's like all young techies and it's rich and stuff, but like that was the thing. You make a San Francisco joke in the 80s or 90s, it was immediately, oh, it's a gay joke. So they have a team called the San Francisco Ferries, which is just all guys in tight pink shirts. And it's spelled F-E-R-R-I-E-S, like they would actually have a ferry boat in San Francisco, but they're the ferries. And so to psych them out during one of the matches, Trey Parker pulls Squeak over and he pulls down his pants and he exposes his butt crack. And Parker's like, you know those commercials for how to speak Australian? Well, here's one, how to speak San Franciscan. And he points to Squeak's ass and he's like, vagina. And the ferries guy falls over, he gets distracted, crashes. It's one of the most horrible jokes in the movie.
I love the fact that he seems to get a card for it. Like he get, and then he's like, no, that wasn't a gay joke. That was an Australian joke.
Yes, that's the line right there that saves it. Where no, it was an Australian joke, not a gay joke.
Yeah.
And so you have this joke, and it's like sitting in the air, like, wow, I can't believe they went for that joke in a movie. And then like 10 minutes later, they visit the dying kid in the hospital, and the first thing the kid says is, "Coop, what's a vagina?"
Like, they went there and then they brought it back, which is just...
I am the biggest fan of callback jokes, and that's one of these callbacks that I just love, because you don't think it's going to come back, and they do immediately, the vagina joke.
Mm-hmm. Coop, what's a vagina? And he says it with just such a sweet, innocent tone.
Wow, I think we have tapped our list. Let's see, we mentioned Unsolved Mysteries, we mentioned the car. Okay, we've done pretty much everything here. Are there any more announcer quotes or anything, any more quotes you'd like to leave our listeners with, to leave them laughing here, George Costanza style?
Let's see. There's when they do go to visit the dying kid, Joey, and they're like, look who's here. And he goes, my biological father. That one also just, it's great.
I will leave people on that one. My biological father, the sick dying kid. Again, just one of those movies, you can hear how much fun we're having with it. And again, obviously we just watched it, but a lot of these quotes, I hadn't seen BASEketball in like 10 years, and I could have reeled a lot of these off the top of my head. Would it be like that for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe it's just because I've watched it so many times. But there are just, when I think of this movie, I always think of so many quotable classic lines. I mean, if I had a nickel for every time I quoted this movie, I'd have a shitload of nickels.
Well done, the callbacks. All right, so again, yeah, it's just one of these movies that it will make you laugh. And again, I always hate using the word guilty pleasure, because you shouldn't feel guilty about anything. But this movie is just flat out funny, and it's kind of charming in a way that it was kind of the precursor to South Park, to Team America, to the South Park movie. This was really Trey and Matt really kind of getting their feet wet in a big blockbuster. And obviously they'd go more over the top in later movies, but like, they weren't actors. They weren't trying to win any awards here. They knew full well this would probably be the only movie they were ever going to star in that hit the big screens like this in like the big way. And they were just having fun with it. And there's such a charm and innocence to it. And it's one of these things, I think you'd probably agree with me, Liana, that like, they're not the greatest actors in the world, but they have such good chemistry together, and they're so charismatic that it just really kind of works, I think.
Yeah, I think it is weird to hear it be described as sort of this like quaint, innocent, elements to it, but that really is kind of how it feels. It feels, even though they're, cursing all the time and referencing necrophilia, there's something quaint about it that just makes me happy. And because, yeah, they aren't the greatest actors, it's not the highest production movie, but there's something very charming about it that I think transcends all of those other elements.
Yeah, and again, it's one of these movies they were not proud of. It was a flop at the time. The critics absolutely reamed it. This movie got killed. And I was kind of surprised. Like a couple of weeks ago, I said I'm doing a podcast on BASEketball, and someone said, well, that's not underrated. Everybody likes BASEketball. And that was kind of news to me. I didn't realize that it had such a renaissance over the years. But it's just one of those things. I just really want people to appreciate comedies like this that, like we said in Bachelor Party, it wasn't really trying to do anything but make you laugh, and that's all it was going to do. Every single scene in this movie is trying to hit you with a punchline and trying to make you laugh somewhere, and I always think there's a room in the world for movies like that.
Yeah, it is. And there's a lot of subtle jokes. Like we talked about, there's no big sort of gut busting or meant to be sort of gut busting moments, but the some of the subtleties, some of the, like the Dan Fogelberg line, right? I mean, that always, it makes me laugh out loud, but that's so incredibly subtle. And that's what I appreciate about this movie.
Yep, and it also features Victoria Silvstedt, Playmate of the Year, who they mentioned that title at least 3 different times in one scene, which I've always had respect for that.
Yeah, go back to your cars and your women and your Victoria Silvstedt Playmate of the Year.
And before we sign off, I do have to say this is the only movie I've ever seen where Al Michaels, a very well-respected sportscaster, one of the most respected sportscasters in the history of sports, there's a scene where Bob Costas taps him on the shoulder and Al Michaels wakes up and says, "No, Daddy, don't touch me there."
Forgot about that one. Like Al Michaels said that. I'm going to have a really hard time watching any NFL football game he's commenting on now and not think of that line.
All right, so I just want to thank you for stopping by, Liana. This was one of my favorite episodes we've done so far because I think I've laughed like the last 40 minutes straight. So
yeah, not gonna lie, my mouth kind of hurts right now, but I had so much fun. This was a blast. I love this movie, and it was such a wonderful experience to talk about it with you.
Okay, do you have anything you want to plug? I know you do a lot of podcasts. Anything you want people to know about if they want to hear more of you?
Sure, yeah. If you are a fan of reality television, Survivor, Big Brother, RuPaul's Drag Race, I'm doing coverage for all 3 of those shows over on Rob Has a Podcast. Mike Bloom and I have the RHAP B&B where we cover Survivor and do a lot of silliness about all of the episodes. So if you're interested, I really highly recommend you check that out.
Excellent. Thank you again for joining me. Perhaps we can do another podcast in the future. But yeah, this was a lot of fun. And again, just to leave people with one last thought on this movie. Long wanger.
Throbbing cocks.
Yeah. All right. Again, my name is Mario Lanza. This is Staff Picks. If you have any feedback on this episode, if you'd like to reach me, you can reach me at staffpickspodcast@gmail.com or on Twitter @MarioJLanza. And until the next time, I'll be out there looking for more movies that I think deserve a little more love or a little more attention in the world. Thank you as always for listening. I'll talk to you guys later. Goodbye.
No, that wasn't a gay joke. That was an Australian joke. Oh.